unequivocally positive that a bomb brought down the airliner. But Egyptian officials are not saying for sure if that's the case. An American official told CNN he's 99.9% certain. Meanwhile, in St. Petersburg, Russia, the flight's intended destination, mourners held a memorial service Sunday to honor the 224 people who died in the crash. Well, Nick Robertson will join us in just a moment from St. Petersburg, Russia. But let's begin with Ian Lee in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Ian, as investigators search for answers, many questions being asked about what is heard on the cockpit recorder. What's the latest we're hearing from officials?
Well, Aisha, Egyptian officials are saying that it's just too soon to tell what exactly that sound is. Now, U.S. officials as well as U.K. officials believe that is the sound of a bomb exploding right before the voice recorder ends. Now, Egyptians are saying that it could be a number of things. It could be a mechanical issue. It could also be a battery exploding. They're asking people to be patient, to wait until the investigation is over. But one of the key things in determining if it is a bomb is going to be finding residue on the plane wreckage at the crash site. We're hearing that they haven't recovered all the pieces of that plane, and so they'll be analyzing that to really confirm if a bomb was indeed, in fact, the reason that plane went down.
Ian Lee with the latest from Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Appreciated, Ian. Let's go now to CNN international diplomatic editor Nick Robertson. He's live in St. Petersburg. And Nick, here was a very, very painful day for residents of St. Petersburg as they remembered the victims of this crash. Tell us about the day.
Yeah, Aisha, it was a very sorrowful day. It was perhaps made even more sorrowful for some of the victims' families. Perhaps it was what they were waiting for and what they were hoping for when another plane came from Egypt carrying some of the victims on board, carrying some of their possessions. But every sort of step along the road to recovering their loved ones, to burying their loved ones is a painful step. Some of those families were at the memorial service here in St. Petersburg and perhaps did find a little solace there. Amidst the rich splendor of Russia's Christian Orthodox tradition, mourners, young and old, came to show their respect, came together in the face of calamity.
It's a horrible tragedy for all Russian people, for the family of those people.
Bells tolled for each of the victims 224 times. For 10-month-old Darina Grimova, for her parents Alexei and Tatiana, for Leonard and Alexandra, whose friends believe became engaged in Sharm el-Sheikh, for 32-year-old Daria Schiller, whose body has yet to be found, for Timur Miller, a 33-year-old businessman, and so many more. The congregation, dwarfed in the cavernous cathedral, still grappling with the enormity of the growing likelihood terrorism brought the plane down.
This is much.
Amidst the rich splendor of Russia's Christian Orthodox tradition, mourners, young and old, came to show their respect, came together in the face of calamity.
It's a horrible tragedy for all Russian people, for the family of those people.
Bells tolled for each of the victims 224 times. For 10-month-old Darina Grimova, for her parents Alexei and Tatiana, for Leonard and Alexandra, whose friends believe became engaged in Sharm el-Sheikh, for 32-year-old Daria Schiller, whose body has yet to be found, for Timur Miller, a 33-year-old businessman, and so many more. The congregation, dwarfed in the cavernous cathedral, still grappling with the enormity of the growing likelihood terrorism brought the plane down.
This is machine. This is machine in the air, and no terrorist.
This longtime St. Petersburg resident, not so sure. I think it will be proved at some point it was a terrorist attack, she tells us. So, of course, I'm worried. We are all worried. Whatever the truth, few here think it will impact the government offensive in Syria.
I think that the government will follow the line that they have chosen already.
That it was hundreds, not thousands here, surprising, given that this is the country's deadliest ever air disaster and an apparent direct targeting of its citizens by overseas terrorists. A potential game changer. At such a moment in this nation's history, its leaders are conspicuous by their absence. President Putin is not here. Leadership for this day at least is being left to God. A temporary glitch, a pause perhaps, in the continuum of Russian politics as its leaders ponder their next move. The politicians perhaps more involved and more focused at the moment on making sure all the Russians who were on holiday in Egypt, who was cut off there essentially as flights to Egypt from Russia have been cancelled, that they are flown home. We understand about 11,000 were flown out over the weekend. That leaves upwards of well over 60,000 more. Tons and tons of their baggage flown on separate cargo flights back to Russia. And of course, a political imperative there for the leadership not to face criticism from stranded holidaymakers in Egypt that somehow the government is bungling getting them home. That's an important political imperative here right now, Aisha.
Indeed. Nick Robertson reporting there from St. Petersburg. Appreciate it. Do stand by for us. Inli, if I could turn back to you and bring you back into the conversation. The threat posed by ISIS in the Sinai Peninsula cannot be underestimated. You've been speaking to some of those trying to contain this deadly group. Tell us about that.
That's right, Aisha. In the northern part of the Sinai, we've seen a real deadly insurgency, a wave of violence. ISIS rose after the 2011 revolution, but it was really in the last couple of years after the overthrow of Islamist President Mohamed Morsi that we really saw them carry out a number of attacks. But despite that, they have not been able to push down south. Now, CNN was able to get an exclusive with the tribal leaders that have been holding off ISIS. This harsh landscape is the new front line in the battle against ISIS. And the men defending it are not soldiers or police. They are Bedouin tribes, nomads, who've ruled the Sinai for centuries. We travel dusty, bumpy roads to find them. We meet 3 sheikhs from 3 different tribes who tell us they directly confronted ISIS, drawing a line in the sand. We stopped ISIS more than 20 times. We went out with more than 50 cars and kicked them back. We didn't shoot one bullet, because if one bullet was shot, there would be a war. The Bedouin accomplished something that billions of dollars in weapons couldn't. They stopped ISIS expanding from the northern part of Sinai to here in the south without shedding any blood. ISIS's Egyptian offshoot is already one of the most dangerous. It has killed hundreds of soldiers and police officers in northern Sinai. And it's trying to expand. Sinai is a desert. The north is flat, the south covered in mountains, and that's why ISIS wants to push south so that they can use this rocky, mountainous terrain for cover while fighting their guerrilla war. The sheikhs tell me their cousins in the north face a dilemma. They want to fight ISIS, but if they're caught with weapons, the Egyptian army might see them as militants. If they help the army, terrible retribution. Here, ISIS beheads alleged army collaborators. But these men are ready to take that risk, even though their communities in Sinai have long been marginalized by the government in far-off Cairo. The Bedouins reject ISIS's twisted version and its invasion of their lands. The tribes could defeat ISIS. If the government came and gave us arms and said, fight ISIS, they would fight ISIS, says this Terabine tribal leader. They'd finish them completely.
And they're ready for battle to save their families, their honor, and their age-old way of life.
And Aisha, talking to these Bedouins, they are very certain that if they were given that support, if the army, the government in Cairo were to come to them, come up with some sort of agreement deal, that the Bedouin could get rid of ISIS very quickly, because it is ultimately their lands and they know the territory very well, and they can differentiate between who is a member of ISIS and who is just a local Bedouin tribal member, and that's something they say that the army just cannot do.
The Egyptian government sure to say that arming the Bedouins would open up another avenue with complications. But Ian Lee reporting there from Sharm el-Sheikh, we appreciate it. Thank you. Our thanks also to Nick Robertson reporting from St. Petersburg. Thanks to you both. Now, millions of votes are being counted in Myanmar following the country's historic election. And people are celebrating, excited that the military may lose more of its power after decades of tight control.